of the subject of irrigation, Tony, it's pretty dry out there.
Yeah, it's extremely dry. As I discussed last time I was in, we were heading back into what looked like sort of strengthening El Nino type conditions, and that's exactly what we've got. Sort of from the bottom half of the North Island, sort of about the southern Taranaki across to the Wairarapa, and then all the way down, exclude the west coast because they're getting hammered.
Yeah, they're getting hammered.
But all the way down the east coast then is really, really dry. I mean, probably as dry as it was pre-Christmas, as dry as it was that sort of November, December 2015. So it's unrelenting as far as particularly pastoral irrigation is concerned. If you've got water, it's absolutely required. The water uses are relatively high for this time of the year. I mean, even though the weather's been quite hot, we get settled weather at this time of the year. We've had very high temperatures. We had a week to 10 days all the way down that sort of eastern seaboard rather, and also out to the western side, sort of the Manawatu sort of area, where we were sitting in the sort of 28s to 30s for nearly 10 days. No rain. So even though the days have shortened up, it means that when we've got those sort of conditions, then we have very high transpiration rates. So water uses are still very high.
We could have done with some rain during a couple of test matches too, couldn't we?
We probably could have done with some rain during a couple of test matches, although Christchurch was okay. I mean, it was in the balance till the Tuesday afternoon. Yeah.
No, I had to bring it up
Yes,
because I know you're an absolute fan. What are the water reserves like?
The water reserves have hung in there pretty well. The run of the river schemes have been on and off, on and off, on and off. We tend to get quite big flushes from the northwesterlies in those rivers, both in sort of the southern, in that Wairarapa area, and then the east coast of the South Island. We're getting those flushes, but they're relatively short-lived, so they come and go quite quickly. And so we go from having restricted water to having plenty of water, going back to restricted water again. So yeah, the run of the river's sort of hanging in there and sort of getting people through. Groundwater's okay, but the concern with groundwater is that we're depleting the reserve of groundwater that we've got. We know that from a lysimeter site that we monitor at the Christchurch Airport, that we've had no drainage, so nothing is drained below 2 metres in the profile since about September 2015.
Really?
So even though we had what were quite reasonable rains in Christmas and that early part of the new year, there was insufficient to refill the deficit in that. It's a dryland site, non-irrigated, so there was insufficient rainfall to refill the site and therefore to get drainage to the groundwater. So the real concern now is that as we head towards the end of the irrigation season, or towards the end of the growing season, we've got very high deficits. Dryland will just about not be growing at all at the moment, and we've got large deficits to replace before we're going to get groundwater recharge in the winter. So I think we need to hope and pray that we get from about May, probably mid-April really, from about mid-April through to June, maybe July. We need to get some significant rainfall events in that time. So we need a real switch around in the weather patterns that we've got right now so that we can get recharge back into the groundwater system for the next irrigation season. So while it's a long way away,
it's not that far.
September, we need, because there's a lag in the time from when it rains and we get excess rainfall before we get rises in groundwater and so more storage in the groundwater system.
Tony, is there a lot of interest in on-farm storage?
On-farm storage is useful only really as a buffer on where you've got irregular or intermittent delivery from schemes. To store enough water to irrigate your farm, you have to take too much productive land out of production to make a big enough pond to store water. So you might have to take 10 or 12 hectares, sometimes 30 hectares out to store enough water. Well, yeah, if you want to store, for example, you take a 200 hectare dairy farm, for example, or a finishing unit that wants to grow grass all year, if you were going to store water to get you through the irrigation season, then you're probably going to have a storage that's sort of 800 to 1 million cubic metres. So when you can't exceed about 3 metres in depth, so you've suddenly got about a 30 hectare pond that you've got to fill up with water in the off season or whenever you can get access to excess water to fill that pond up. So they're very expensive to build. You're talking about $3 to $5 a cubic metre to build them. So you're talking about a relatively large capital expenditure to build a pond big enough to give you storage for the whole year. If you're looking for something a bit smaller, just to get you by
Just to get over the elbows, as it were.
Well, even 10 or 20 days, you've still got to have 50 to 100,000 cubic metres, and there's $500,000 just to build a pond.
There's those big ones sort of just round off the Rangitata there. There's a couple of decent sized ones.
Yeah, there's 8 of them there.
8 of them.
That's for the Rangitata South Irrigation Scheme.
Yep.
So they will only be filled in the winter, or in the spring when we get snow melt in the Rangitata, and it's flowing at very high flows. So you go past them now and they'll be empty. So only in the late winter or early spring will they be full, and each farmer has got to have a very large storage to get them by on that scheme as well. So that's what those big ponds are for.
And that's the sort of to do the scheme rather than to do a farm.
Yeah, that's to do a scheme, yeah. But on each farm there has to be, I forget the exact figures, but they've got to have so many 200 cubic metres or something like that per hectare that they irrigate. So that's still a sizable pond to build on your property.
Yeah, good on Rooney's for doing it.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. On outlooking, or the outlook, I should say.
Well, look, we're still in a pretty strong El Nino weather pattern. All the signs, everything's still there as far as El Nino is concerned. So southwesterly, westerly weather for the eastern sides of New Zealand, especially south of Hawke's Bay. So there's no prospect in the immediate future of any significant rainfall events. In fact, I think we're probably looking out into April before we see anything serious.